Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Mark from Solo Games, and today we're going to talk about a topic that I actually had a pretty interesting conversation with a friend over the weekend. And the topic is basically is banning the right solution to problems, right? To problematic archetypes, to metas, to things like that. And for today's kind of video, we're going to use examples from Magic and Grand Archive, and these are the two games I kind of know well, and we'll kind of talk through it, right? So, Magic recently released the Lord of the Rings set; everyone knows about it, but the from the play aspect, there are some issues obviously with the One Ring. Now, the One Ring is a very powerful card. I think I was one of the first creators to talk about this way early on and say, like, I look at the card as it's a 4 mana Phyrexia Arena, but it's 4 generic. I don't have to pay black, 2 black pips into it. It can't be destroyed because it's indestructible. Right? You can exile it, but a lot of times my Phyrexia Arena basically gets disenchanted like immediately, so I don't really get a lot of value out of it. And lastly, it still gives you a protection for turn, which is kind of nice in Commander, especially when you have to go like 2 or 3 rounds and then it's your turn again. So there's a lot of like benefits to this card, right? And in addition to this, I think one of the problems that happened over the weekend was that there was a huge like modern tournament or whatever, and a lot of the top decks were running the One Ring. And so, of course, people were like, "Oh, look how staple this thing is. We got to ban it because it's going to be boring. It's causing problems for the meta, for modern already." And I'm just like sitting here thinking, like, what happened to the old school way of thinking through a problem, which is you have to go solve it through brewing, solve it through building and adjusting your deck to the current meta. If everyone's running the One Ring, maybe you have to run some solutions or answers against the One Ring. It's not oppressive enough of a threat that there is no solution and the only solution is to ban, right? So I don't understand what's going on where all these players are basically crying to mommy Watsy and saying, hey, like, please ban this thing because I don't like it. Whereas you should go solve that problem for yourself, right? And I'm not saying like, look, everyone's gonna be a great brewer, go brew some like crazy decks and now beat this meta. That's not what I'm asking. And honestly, if one card is really your problem, you could solve it by adding another card, right? So like recently, I think I was like looking at Saffron Olive's post, and he's like, just run Mass Vandal, right? Mass Vandal allows you to exile an artifact. Easy. And it's pretty easy requirement. You exile a card from your graveyard, you can exile an artifact on enter. The card is also like a changeling, so it's nice. It's easy, right? There's so many ways, and I'm sure that's like, Magic has been around for so long. And if you're playing, let's say, Modern, you have such a huge card pool that you have options pretty much in every single color, or at least every single 2 color combination that you can think of to deal with the One Ring. It's not a problem. The only problem is the fact that people aren't even taking the time to think about that solution, right? And then I look at, like because I started getting interested in this whole ban listing, whatever. And like the Commanders Rules Committee, the RC, made an announcement about like, oh, we're looking into a couple other cards that maybe we need to ban, Orcish Bowmaster or whatever. I'm like, look, the card's cool, but it's like singleton 100 cards. It's not going to cause a problem. Number two, like realistically, what happened to people just having fun? Like, there should be powerful cards. There should be cards that are really, really good. And you should have a way to deal with it. That's kind of the point. Commander especially has access to all cards effectively of Magic, number one. Number two, it's a multiplayer game, so politics is a big part of it. So it's okay if somebody is essentially like more or higher power level or has a better starting hand, because guess what's going to happen on the table? They're all going to gain up against this person. It's not a problem, right? So the fact that Commander is even considering banning some of the cards like this, to me, is just like, what is happening with our society where nobody has any amount of patience, and every single time they see a problem for like even a second, they have no patience to go think of a solution, and rather would just complain all they can and say, oh, we got to change everything, right? Looking at Grand Archive side. Recently, like, looking through it, look, I'm not a brewer. I think I've said this in the beginning of the video. I'm really bad at it. I'm better at piloting decks, I think, but in general, I'm not a good person at building new decks. However, I'm still against like just copy and pasting decks, because I think like, sometimes what I'll do is I'll start with somebody else's deck archetype, and I'll think about how I can make that deck like more like my archetype by like adjusting some cards, what plays well for me, what doesn't play well with me, and just experimenting, right? Like I took, for example, a Fire Merlin deck list, and I started thinking like, well, maybe I want to get to Merlin faster. Could I add a dungeon guide and all those things, right? And I did some adjustments where I was just kind of testing the water and see it, does it work better, does it not work better? And I noticed it didn't work better, so I'm just trying different things, right? And it's okay. It's okay, guys, to have a deck that you may be playing at a tournament, like locals, whatever, that you don't win. It's fine. It's part of testing. It's part of understanding the game. It's part of having fun, like experimenting, right? It's so sad to me that there are so many players who just refuse to even spend a moment on building something for themselves, and all they do is just say, hey, can you update your meta deck? Oh, now with this new change, how is your deck going to change? And all they do is just sitting there waiting and spending all this time on Discord asking for a deck list update rather than to go and actually just, I don't know, build your own version, right? I think the example I'm talking about here for the people who play Grand Archive is like Wind Lorraine. Everybody knows about the Ferrari. It's like a very fast Wind Lorraine deck. And as soon as, of course, like with all the changes about level up and all that stuff, this change actually realistically only really affects Fire Lorraines more probably. But yes, I get it. All the Lorraines kind of get affected because Lorraine was the one deck that was abusing this kind of like double swinging. By waking up your champion on level up, you can kind of like hit for a lot of damage, get a free wake up. A free untap. Sorry, I realized I started this video with Magic audience and now I'm fully in Grand Archive. I got to kind of like speak the language here. Basically allows you to untap your champion. You can swing more damage. You can imagine how powerful that is. So the game actually made a change. It didn't ban any cards, but it made a change where waking up a champion no longer untaps it, which is a big deal because it means that this one deck that was going to basically wake up, swing for, let's say, I don't know, 8, 9 damage on the next attack, couldn't do that anymore, and it slows that deck down. Now, most of the players who looked at this change and realized the problem, but they didn't have the creativity to go think, okay, how do I work around this problem? How do I solve this problem, right? I started thinking like, okay, well, if I can't do that, maybe I don't care to attack with Lorraine, my main champion. Maybe I can do something with Insol. It's a different card that allows you to basically grab all your weapons, and all the weapons can attack by themselves without the champion, right? There's options here. That's what I started looking at. And there's other options now I'm thinking about, like maybe I can do this instead. Maybe I can do that instead. And the thing is, like, that's part of the fun of the game. Like what has happened where people, when they see a problem, all they can think of is like, somebody else, please help me solve this problem. Right? The other conversation around Grand Archive recently that I've heard is like a lot of people were talking about how like the meta is stale. Oh, there's 3 top decks. And basically these are the people, by the way, that tell me these things. They run one of the 3 top decks. It's basically at the very, very top of Grand Archive right now, what I see is pretty commonly kind of like a rock, paper, scissors situation, right? There's 3 decks. They kind of like go against each other, and they're all good against one other deck and weak against another in a circular fashion, okay? And rather than think about, okay, well, what is the common weakness of all 3 decks? Can I kind of overcome that with a different deck? They start complaining about how the meta's stale, there's no other decks, there's like other decks are not viable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just sitting here like, guys, no. With the regionals coming up for Grand Archive, right? There's a lot of people who are brewers or true brewers. I know they have decks. I know they have decks that can go faster. And this is not like information I gathered. This is actually me listening to a lot of the top players talk about it. They're like talking about like, hey, I don't know what the deck list is, but I know there's ways to go faster than what we're seeing today. Like, if you think the game is fast now, it could go faster. That's what I'm hearing, right? I don't know if it can go faster, but I do think there are decks that we have not seen that are actually truly top tier. I think that does exist somewhere, right? The other thing that's also interesting is like, look, if you think the meta is really that stale, you really need to go play at a different store. Because like, for example, locally at my store, when I was playing, even just this past weekend, I lost to a Wind Xander. And I'm like, what is this? It's not like a Wind Xander that's like kind of going super, super, super fast or whatever. Sorry, it's going super fast, but it doesn't even level up past level 1, right? It relies on creatures, it relies on a Gildas, it relies on like 2 different like swings by the Xander, 2 different attacks by the Xander to basically end the game. And this Xander actually punishes my deck super well. because my deck's basically also trying to do the same thing. We're trying to go slow. I'm basically burning myself to death to kind of go faster, right? To go low to the ground faster. And of course, the Xander says, well, okay, well, you're going to go fast. I'm going to go even faster and kill you instead. And it works really well. And that's the kind of creativity I want to see. It's not, the game is not dead. The meta is not stale. I think there's so much more opportunity and possibility, and people aren't even trying. And so that is what I guess this video is all about, is just like, guys, like, stop doing this thing where you're like complaining all the time and just try something. There's solutions out there. The game creator, in fact, probably created that solution for you. Will there be problematic cards? Absolutely. But give it time, right? I would say for any game, for any new set, whatever, I think 2 to 3 months is a very fair amount of time for the set to really bake. And then we see if there are cards that are problematic, and maybe only when we have no other solutions, ban those cards. Grand Archive has the opportunity with the next incoming expansion set to actually slow down the game by quite a bit. So right now, everyone's complaining about the speed of the game, right? It's too fast. And I'm already seeing a ton of cards that are going to slow down the game. Do exactly that. And that's a great thing. And this is the beautiful thing, is like the creators are giving you solutions in the next set. All you have to be is just a little bit patient, especially if you really think there is no other way to solve the problem. And I'm telling you, I think there are other ways to solve the problem. Like recently, I've seen some deck lists that are like Water Sylvie decks that are pretty slow, and if they get there, they build a wall that you cannot overcome, right? And there are still other possibilities I think people aren't even trying or thinking about. And it's one of those things where it's like, you gotta like do more than just sit there and complain. That's all. Mark Solar Games, stay classy.